Okay, hello, hello. I This is going to be about seed starting. And I am broadcasting on my channel Janet's Pineapple Time, which I don't often use, but it's a channel for um when I want to do stuff that's not strictly energy healing and reading, which is my profession. Want to do other stuff. So hopefully my clients will appreciate it. Maybe one or two of my neighbors that want to learn seed starting. But I'm going to do two separate live streams just to keep them a little bit more organized. One right after the other. The first one is this one on seed starting supplies. Because I think that stuff really matters too. It's not just like use whatever to start your seeds. What you use can make a big difference, I think. So that's what this is about. Mm-hmm. And I don't really expect people to be on here live. I just don't want to make a video and edit it and put it up because it's just too much work. So live streaming is easier. But if anyone is watching live, please feel free to say hi. Like maybe my husband who wants to tell me that it's live streaming properly. That would be nice. But anyway, okay. So seed starting supplies. First thing first, soil, obviously, is a big deal. What soil you use. And technically seed starting mix is different from soil. So I think, in different countries they call it different, but this here is an example of seed starting mix. This is from Gardener's Supply, and this one actually is not especially environmentally correct, I think. It's sphagnum peat moss. Okay, thanks. Sphagnum peat moss, perlite, ground limestone, and dolomite, and a wetting agent. But it looks just like it looks just like very, very fluffy stuff, right? And that's what you want because these seeds are really teeny, teeny, teeny. And you don't want anything that's really chunky for your seed starting. Now, what I do though is I also use potting soil underneath the seed starting mix. But it's important that the potting soil should not have a lot of fertilizer in it for seed starting. And I did make a mistake this spring that then I had to fix. Later, I had to start a whole bunch of new seeds again because I put fertilizer in my potting soil, and new little sprouts cannot handle fertilizer. It will burn them or stunt them. It's just bad. So when you start seeds, they're like little infants, So little silly details really matter. So anyway, you want seed starting mix, and this one is from Gardener's Supply Company, and they're kind of an expensive company. They're in the US. Their stuff I think is made in the US, which could explain why their stuff is so expensive. But the seed starting mix I have had really good results with, so I just pay a little extra and get their seed starting mix. I did try because my potting soil that I always use is with good results. The only time I use a different potting soil is if it's out and I really need something quickly. But this is the potting soil I pretty much try to always use for indoor seed stuff. And the brand is Fox Farm, and the type of potting soil is Happy Frog. So see that Fox Farm Happy Frog, and this is a big 2 cubic foot bag of it, and I get I use like an old big cat litter bin and a dolly underneath it to like wheel it around the house because 2 cubic feet of soil is heavy. And so I used to like haul it around, but that's kind of ridiculous and messy. So I use this. So I'll show you what I use. I'll move the camera to show you. try to move the camera. Sorry about this. Anyway, so this is what I use. It's like a, this is like a, we have a lot of extra ones now because we don't have as many cats, but this is like a Tidy Cats litter box where they jump in from the top, you know, and so it's really sturdy and strong, and I have a bunch of them. And then see how it's on a wheelie dolly, so I just wheel it around. So the bag's almost empty now, but when it's full, it's this giant heavy thing of soil. So anyway, I use, so inconvenient. But anyway, so that's the soil I use. I use seed starting mix for like the top layer, and then like maybe about the lower half or the lower 60% is that Happy Frog potting soil. Because and I, you know, sometimes if I'm really motivated, I'll sift out the hard, because Happy Frog will have like little chunks of something in them, like bark that hasn't fully broken down. So I'll just, you know, hand pick those out. But I may, if I'm feeling really motivated, I have like a soil sifter so I can sift out all the chunks. But, you know, usually just picking them out with my hand is enough. So I'll do that. But the seed starting, the seed starting mix for the top layer, you know, right, that touches the seed, you definitely want that to be like incredibly fine stuff. So technically, I think you could use potting soil, but you'd have to sift it then. But anyway, so that's it. I use those two things. The benefit of seed starting mix is not only that it's really fine, but also that it doesn't have a lot of food in it, which I think makes it more sterile and less likely for molds and funguses to grow in it. And that's better for the seed when it's, you're just germinating. You don't want it to have a lot of mold or fungus, because there are certain funguses. I think it's called damping off. Damping off is where there's this special fungus that just basically like destroys the seed as it germinates, or before it germinates, or just after it germinates, if the soil is too damp. So that leads me to my next topic in seed starting supplies. So we've done the soil, right? It's a mix. I use two different things. I use the seed starting mix, and then I use potting soil underneath it. Why do I use potting soil at all? It's a little bit laziness friendly, because if you only use seed starting mix, that has no food in it for the little sprout as it grows. And so I like to use, okay, like this is what I'm going to be using this winter to grow my kale and basil, to start my kale and basil seeds in. And so the bottom half of it, or the bottom like 60% maybe, I'll put the Happy Frog potting soil in. I'll pre-moisten it too, but I'll go over that in the next live stream. But anyway, so there'll be the Happy Frog potting soil, and then there'll be the seed starting mix. And that way I don't have to pot up the seedling that quickly, because it already has food. As it gets bigger, the roots will go down, and it'll go into the roots will go into the potting soil, and it'll get that food from the potting soil. If it was all just seed starting mix, it would be kind of a waste. It would be a lot of seed starting mix, and seed starting mix is like ridiculously expensive. And so there'd be the cost, but then also it wouldn't have enough food, so it could get too weak, the little seedling. So anyway, that's why I do, you know, the lower half potting soil that is chunk-free, somewhat chunk-free, and then the top is potting soil as seed starting mix. That's, you know, really fine. Okay, so now this kind of thing, right? The seed starting tray, or they're called cell trays also, you know, because each one is a cell. I like ones with bigger size trays because, you know, I have work. Sometimes it's really engrossing, you know, and so like for 2-3 days, I just cannot be bothered with seed starting homework except maybe watering it, you know. And so say you have to pot up a seedling, if it doesn't have a lot of room, say if I used really small cell trays with little small compartments, then I'd have to pot it up like on a certain day. Otherwise the little seedling would get stunted. Whereas if I have a bigger cell tray, it's more procrastination friendly for me. And so I can just just water and keep up with watering, and that's it for a couple days if my work is very engrossing. So that's why I like the bigger trays for that. And this is all indoor when I start my seeds. So this is from the same company as the seed starting mix, Gardener's Supply Company, and their website is gardeners.com. And this they call the Grow Ease planting tray. And initially I had gotten, they have a kit where it's like you get this, and then you get the reservoir that it sits in at the bottom, and you get the dome that it, over that you put over it. But then they also give you these it's like stands on these little stilts and like a mat, a water wicking mat. But I ended up not using that. So I don't use the mat, the water wicking mat, and the little stilt things that it sits on. I don't think that's useful enough. I think that with the water wicking, it keeps the soil too wet. And with seed starting, how wet your soil is really specific and important. So I'll go over that more in the next live stream when I walk through the process of how you start seeds, because I have to start some basil and kale seeds to grow, because I'm going to grow those indoors in my grow room all winter, because that way we'll have kale to eat in the winter and basil. So I'll go over that stuff more later about how moist you keep things. But anyway, that's why I do not need a and also initially I got all this show you. I got their 24 cell ones, which you could get, but I've found that in a lot of situations I don't need 24 cells of one thing. I just need, I don't know if someone's trying to comment, because I can't see the comments if someone is trying to comment, but feel free to say hi if you are watching live. But anyway, so I found that, because the thing is, like, say you're sprouting a whole bunch of different things, right? And you put them just in one tray like this. It's not so bad, because you can put like a little marker and say like, okay, this row is, this, and this row is this row is this, or, do your rows that way and put little markers. So, but I tend to get things really mixed up often. So that's sort of tempting fate, putting them all in the same cell tray. But also, I'll go over this in the seed starting process live stream also, but you put a dome over it at first. I don't have the dome for this one, but there is a clear plastic dome that comes with this one, the 24 one. But if it was like a whole bunch of different kinds of seeds, they would germinate. Some would germinate much faster than the others. And then you'd have, ideally you should take your dome off once they're germinated and you can see like little green poking up out of the soil. But if some others haven't germinated yet, then they still need their dome. And so that's why this year, I haven't used them yet. This fall will be the first time I use them. But I got 12 cells instead. So that way, each one of them has its own dome, each dozen. So I'll do the kale in one of these and the basil in a different one. So that way, say the kale sprouts way faster than the basil, it doesn't matter because they'll be separate. And so, I'll be able to just keep the dome on as long as needed and not any longer. So, and the water reservoir under it, I won't use that initially, because I'll go over that in the next live stream, but you pre-moisten the soil, you put it in there when it's already like just damp enough. And then, you're going to spritz it. So that's the next supply thing, is this mister. And I'm going to do it so you can see it, but I'm going to try to not get all my electronics wet at the same time. Anyway, it's like this. If you pump it, then see, I don't know if you could see that, but that's like a mist of water that came out. That hopefully didn't get my electronics. Oh, it didn't. Okay, good. So anyway, so this is important too, because you want to be able to mist, the top, and I'll use that in the live stream, the next live stream. But anyway, that's one of your supplies, right? Is a mister. Very delicate, super delicate mister. Not like, like you're trying to kill a bug with a mister. It's like, this is just a delicate spray, right? For when it's just seeds and you're just like moistening the seed a little, or you're moistening just the surface a little bit. You don't want to disrupt your seeds. And then also later, again, when they're just little seedlings, you just want to water as much as is needed, not more than that. You look at like the color of the soil and see. And so this will help you do really precise watering, because this spout is so narrow. So you're not just like, destroying some seedling by overwhelming it with water, because you can kind of knock over a seedling and then it may not recover, with the water stream. So you want to water like right near the seedling, but not on top of it, so having a really precise spout like that's small is really helpful. So this was not cheap because it's metal and everything, and the spout's nice and precise, but it's very useful for, when they're little baby sprouts and you need to water the soil. So, but then later, when they're more mature seedlings, but they're still in here, then I would use the water reservoir and just, fill it up to a certain point and soak it, and let the soil soak up the moisture. And that's good too, watering. It's called bottom watering. And that's good because once your seedlings are already germinated and their roots are going down lower in the cell, you want to give them water from the bottom so that the top surface stays drier. The top surface of the soil or the seed starting mix stays drier, because that way there's less mold, less fungus, and less chance for fungus gnats, which are really annoying and can harm your seedlings. Fungus gnats are like little flying little bugs that breed in the soil, and their larvae, their babies, their little larvae in the soil can eat the roots of your seedlings and destroy your seedlings. So if the top surface of the soil is not damp, then it's less of a friendly environment for the fungus gnats. And that's why also it's really important what soil you use and what you bring into your grow room. Like, don't just randomly buy plants, somewhere and think, oh, it'll be fine. Because it's very easy to buy a plant. Like, say, one winter I bought some basil plants at Trader Joe's, a grocery store, because I was kind of late on my seed starting and my basil that I was growing wasn't ready yet. And I was like, well, let's just get some basil at the store, some basil plants at the store, for the little bit of time in between, right? When my basil isn't ready yet. Problem with that was that basil from the store, it looked healthy, but it had bugs in the soil. It had fungus gnats in the soil. So then eventually my whole grow room had fungus gnats. And some other thing, I forget what it was called, but some other kind of bug too. And I'm pretty sure I got it just from the Trader Joe's plants, even though they looked healthy when I bought them. So now I'm much more, I will only have things that I've grown and that I know. I don't bring stuff from outside into my grow room indoors. I really try to control the environment really strictly, so that I don't get bugs. So that's why I use the same potting soil all the time, because you can get bugs from your potting soil really easily. And so far, knock on wood, I've had good luck with Fox Farm Happy Frog potting soil and this seed starting mix. But it's good to be ready in case you do have a problem for fungus gnats, but that's a whole nother thing. So if you have questions about that, you could comment in the comment section at some point, and I could mention a few things about that. But anyway, so that might be all that I wanted to mention. Also, you do need to be ready for when the seedlings are big enough that, like you can see roots through the bottom. And so, they're ready to pot up into the next size. You don't want to pot up too early, because if the roots aren't kind of holding the all the soil together, then when you try to pot them up, it'll like come apart and you'll have this dangling little root with the seedling, which isn't the end of the world, but it's a little more stressful for the seedling. So if you wait until the roots kind of fill out the cell a little bit and you can see the roots coming down, then when you lift it out, it'll more likely be like a nice little block of soil and root, and that's less stressful for the plant. But you don't want to leave it in there so much that it becomes root bound, in which case you see like the roots winding around and around on the inside, and that's not great for the plant, because the problem is if it's root bound, then if you don't kind of really gently unravel the roots so that they kind of hang down better, then they might stay round and round and round even if you put them into something bigger. And you want your roots to spread out everywhere, right? For a nice healthy plant that later, can get nutrients from all the soil, right? So timing is kind of important, but that's why I use these bigger cells, so that you have a little bit extra time before you have to pot up. So then I just wanted to mention briefly about larger sizes that you would pot up into. I used to think, like in the spring, when I'm growing like tomato seedlings or marigold seedlings or basil seedlings for summer outside in the garden, I used to think, well, okay, this is a good size. I'll just put this on the porch when they're ready and, introduce it to cloudy days and then sunny days, and then eventually put it in my garden right from here, right? But the problem with that is there's not a lot of soil in here. So this soil dries out quickly because there's just not a lot of soil. And so outdoors, it's exposed to the sun and the wind. And so these cells can dry out really easily. And that's very stressful for a young plant. So what I learned is it's better to let them mature and pot them up into a bigger size before I bring them out to my porch, because, I don't want to stress out my plants. And also, when I bring them out to my porch, it's not just like, okay, they're there for like 2 days until they adjust to the wind and the sun and everything, and then they go in the garden. Typically, that's in my mind, in this ideal world, that's what happens. They're only on the porch for like 3 days before they're in the garden in the soil. But that's not true. It might be weeks before I get time to plant them, because I have so many and I'm doing so much and I have work, So what I've learned is to pot them up into a bigger size, like I said, and this is an option. This I found was a good size for by the time it gets to the porch. If it's in one of these, that's a good amount of soil to, so that it will stay moist, at least lower down longer, and then it's not so stressful for the plant. Or, oops, there's so much stuff to show you. So this brand is called McConkey. I got them on Amazon. I think they're made in the US. It's a US company, at least. McConkey, McConkey. And this is their 3.5-inch pot. They also have a 5.5-inch pot, which is right here. So this is the bigger size, 3.5 and 5.5 inch. So you pot up gradually, so last winter I used this size, and the winter before that I used this size for my indoor basil and kale. But the problem was that it's not even big enough for like all winter long growing for the kale and the basil. So I'm going to investigate an even bigger pot size than this 5.5-inch one for my winter indoor growing of kale and basil, because they're in my house growing all winter long, and we're harvesting, and the roots need a lot of extra room. So I'm going to have to figure out another even bigger size than this for my winter growing. But okay, so in addition to this, right, where that's a good size to pot up to, this McConkey 3.5-inch pot. I tried these this year, and these I like actually, possibly better than these. Of course, I have a ton of these, so I'll still be using them, and they are very, very good quality. Like they, you know, the sun doesn't break down the plastic, and they're sturdy. You know, you can abuse them a little bit, and they won't break. They will break though if you drop them enough times, I've found. But this, so another really good brand in general for gardening supplies is Bootstrap Farmer. They're not cheap, but they are good, like quality. So they'll last you year after year after year, which in the end is cheaper than just buying cheap stuff. So Bootstrap Farmer, another US brand. I think their stuff is made in the US. Not entirely sure, but this, because of the shape of it, I think it's better. At least it seems like it's better for me than this shape. This shape, it's slightly not as wide. Like this is 3.3 inches and this is 3.5 inches. So, you know, not that big a difference. And it's pretty much a similar height. But because it's not like a square edge like that, it has a little bit of a, you know, I don't know, it kind of goes in a little. I found that the roots of the plants didn't like wrap around and around and around as much as they do in this. Their roots, more of the roots just went straight down, which is better in the long run for the plant, you know, because if they go round and round and round and round, they kind of bond and tangle up more. And I found that from using this one this year that it was like the seedlings seemed to be healthier because the roots went down, straight down. More of them went straight down rather than go around. And they did come out the bottom. The problem with it is the bottom holes are not that big. So I had to like rip out some of the roots to get the plant out because there were so many roots coming out the bottom. But, you know, that's kind of my own fault for waiting so long to transfer them from here out into the yard. But, you know, that's my life. I tend to start a whole bunch of things and then life and work comes along and they end up being in the pots quite a long time before they get in the ground. But these are a good option, especially for slow plants with roots that don't grow as fast. Like I grew some Shasta daisies from seed. Those roots grow crazy fast. So this would not be as good an option as this for like a Shasta daisy. Because the roots grow so fast and you don't want all those roots to go round and round and round and round and round. So this might be better for that. But echinacea, I grew from seed. Echinacea is a perennial. And so perennials in general, Shasta daisies are a perennial too. But for some reason, Shasta daisies they grow really quickly. But echinacea don't grow as fast. So I found that this was fine for echinacea. Like their roots just don't grow as fast. So they're not like wrapped around and around and around and around because they're just slower. So anyway, what else did I want to say? And the Bootstrap Farmer one with this, because they're a little top heavy because of their design. And so, but they sell these tray inserts so that, you know, if you get like a standard 1020 tray, I'll show you what a 1020 tray is. A 1020 tray, 1020, is like a standard gardening term. And it just, I guess it means like 10 inches by 20 inches in size. And those are pretty standard. So you'll probably end up with a bunch of 1020 trays eventually. And they're useful. But if you get them from a good brand, like Bootstrap Farmer 1020 trays, those are ones that I have, and they're really sturdy. I even use them in my closet to like organize things, or like up on a high shelf. I'll put stuff on a 1020 tray and then I can pull it out all at once. It's easier. And these things are really sturdy. But anyway, this is a 1020 tray. right? And so like when my basil plants and my kale plants get bigger in my grow room, they'll be in pots, and the pots will be in this 10-20 tray. And the benefit of that is then you just water the bottom of the 10-20 tray, and you fill that up with a certain amount of water, and that waters all the pots in the tray. So you won't have to like mess around with watering each one individually when the plants are that big. You just water from the bottom using your 10-20 tray. But anyway, these inserts allow you to use a 10-20 tray with these pots, and that way they don't fall, if they're in the insert. These, if you go with the McConkey ones instead, you don't need the insert. But like I said, then if you're procrastinate a lot like me, and you have ones that with the roots that grow fast, they might, get root bound more on this than in this. But anyway, so that's basically it. But for seed starting, I would say just, from if you don't mind spending. I mean, if you want to get something cheap just to like for your first year to see if you even like the process, I don't think that's a terrible idea. But, think about I would definitely, don't go cheap on. Well, I guess if you have to go cheap, you could just get potting soil and sift it. But sifters are not cheap either. Yeah, I don't think it's a cheap hobby, to be honest. Like somebody, I saw this post, they're like, oh yeah, they said grow tomatoes to save money, And I don't think gardening as a hobby saves you money really much. I mean, maybe in the long run, but for a while, you're not saving money because the supplies are not cheap. Especially to get good ones so you don't have to throw them out in a year when they break, But, whatever. If you're just starting out and you don't know if this hobby is going to be for you, then. But it's still not cheap because I haven't even talked about the indoor grow lights that you would need, and I should mention that because if you're going to sprout things in the house, and especially then if you're going to grow them to maturity in the house, like me, I'm going to grow kale and basil all winter long, so they'll be mature plants. They won't be seedlings anymore. And I'll just keep them indoors in pots in the house. You need grow lights because they need strong sunlight. I mean, grow lights are not as strong as outdoor sun actually. But it's way stronger than, some light they might get through a sunny window, that kind of thing. So I have shelves. I have metal shelves, and then I have each shelf has a grow light on it that shines down. And when your plants are just seedlings, like at this stage, they need the grow light, depending on the strength of the grow light. If the grow light is not super strong, then the grow light needs to be pretty close to the seedlings. Because otherwise the seedlings will be like really skinny and they'll get like overly tall and lanky because they're searching for more sunlight. They're thinking, well, if I just grow taller, then the sunlight will, they're thinking that some plant is blocking some of the sun and they just need to outgrow that plant and reach the sun. So, but if you have strong grow lights that are close, or whatever closest they should be for seedlings, then your seedlings won't be as weird and weak, and they won't struggle. They'll just stay nice and short and healthy and get very green. So that's a whole other aspect. So there's the soil, how you water, with this kind of stuff. With this kind of stuff. The cell trays that you use, and the fact that you need domes at first. And I guess a cheap dome would be just saran wrap over the cell tray if you don't have a dome. But the purpose of that is to keep the soil moist. And I'll go over that in the next live stream. But anyway, so yeah, so the what the soil goes into, how you water the soil itself, and it does make kind of a mess indoors, to do it all. So I have this thing. It's like I wish I got one that was a little smaller. but you spread it out, and it's like somewhat waterproof, and so that way you're working with the soil and the cell trays and everything on top of this, and then you just take the excess dirt, you dump it outside. There are ones that are like hard rather than flexible and bendable like this, and so it's like a hard little basin that you work in, which is okay. Sometimes I wish I had that instead. The plus of this is that, when you're not using it, you just kind of bundle it up and, so it's small. But sometimes I wish I had that hard basin instead, because this can kind of flop and be all over the place. So, but that's it. I think that's all I wanted to say for the supplies, other than the grow lights, which is a whole nother thing. But yeah, so good luck starting seeds. And like I said, I'm about to do a different live stream where I show more, a little more about, because I'm going to be starting basil and kale seeds for our indoor winter use. I hope that makes sense. And if you have questions, feel free to post below. Bye.